Have you ever felt like you were being watched, or that something just wasn't right? These are 4 true stories of people who experienced the unimaginable, stories told by those who lived through them. Listen closely, because this could happen to anyone. It was a typical Saturday morning for Amy and Jack, a couple living in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The kind of neighborhood where kids still played outside and everyone knew each other's names. But one morning, something arrived that would change their lives forever. As they pulled into the driveway, they noticed a small, unmarked box sitting on their porch. It was strange, but not immediately alarming. After all, who hasn't had a misdelivered package? Amy picked it up, feeling its unusual weight, and brought it inside. Jack was skeptical, but Amy had an instinct that something wasn't right. As they opened the box, they were greeted by a stack of photographs. At first, they were just ordinary pictures, images of their home, their backyard, their family. But as they kept flipping through them, something caught Amy's eye. In each picture, someone was there. Someone in the background. Someone who shouldn't have been there. One photo stood out, a dark figure hidden among the trees in their backyard. The figure was barely visible, just a shadow, blending into the landscape. But the terror of that moment struck Amy like a bolt of lightning. They had been watched, and they hadn't even noticed. And then the worst photo of all. It was a picture of Amy and Jack standing in their kitchen, unaware, just moments before they opened the box. Someone had been inside their home, watching them, right up until they discovered the package. The police were called, but despite a thorough investigation, no one could find any trace of the person who left the box. The photos were never explained, and the couple was left with only one terrifying question. How long had someone been watching them? And who was the person behind it all? Not all scares come in the form of mysterious boxes. Some come with a knock at the door, a knock that changes everything. One evening, Sarah was home alone in her apartment. It had been a normal day. She finished work early, ordered some takeout, and settled in for a relaxing evening. But around 8:30 p.m., something interrupted her peaceful night. A knock on the door. At first, she thought it was just a delivery, but something about the man's demeanor felt off. He was well dressed, but his eyes were too intense, his smile too wide. He said he had a package for her, though she hadn't ordered anything. Sarah, unsure, opened the door a crack, but the man pushed back, trying to force his way inside. His smile faded, and a cold, malicious look replaced it. It was then that Sarah realized this was no simple delivery. She managed to slam the door shut and locked it just in time. The man, now furious, began banging on the door, demanding she open it. She quickly called the police, but by the time they arrived, the man was gone. There was no trace of him anywhere. No package, no footprints, just the terrifying knowledge that someone had been there. Someone who wanted more than just a simple delivery. Sometimes, the most terrifying moments happen when you're least expecting it, when you're just going about your day, and suddenly, you're thrust into a nightmare. Jessica had worked late that night. It was a chilly autumn evening, and the streets were nearly empty as she walked back to her car. As she passed an alleyway, she heard footsteps behind her. At first, she thought it was just someone else walking home, but when the footsteps grew louder, she felt a knot form in her stomach. She turned around, but there was no one there. Confused, she shrugged it off, but as she continued walking, the footsteps came again. Closer, faster, like someone was following her. Without warning, a figure stepped out of the darkness. A tall man, his face obscured by the shadows. Jessica's heart raced. The man didn't say a word, just stood there, staring at her. She froze in place, too terrified to move. The man finally spoke, his voice low and cold. "Where are you going?" Before she could respond, the man started walking towards her, his pace slow but purposeful. Jessica quickly turned and ran as fast as she could, not stopping until she reached her car. She never saw the man again, but she never forgot the feeling of his eyes on her back, of the way he seemed to vanish into the darkness just as quickly as he had appeared. Some encounters are even more bizarre, leaving behind questions that are never truly answered. On a foggy night in the middle of nowhere, Tim was driving home from a friend's house, miles away from the nearest town. It was late and the road was nearly empty. But then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw a figure standing by the side of the road. A woman, dressed in white, waved him down. Tim, cautious but not wanting to leave someone stranded in the middle of nowhere, stopped the car. The woman got in, thanking him, and gave an address that seemed familiar. As they drove, the woman barely spoke, only pointing to a house on the edge of town. When they arrived, Tim looked over to offer his assistance, but the woman was gone. He hadn't heard the door open or close. She had simply vanished. Tim got out of the car and looked around, but the woman was nowhere to be found. The house she had pointed to, abandoned. It had been empty for years. He never understood what had happened that night, but he never picked up another hitchhiker again. These stories remind us that the world is full of mysteries, some harmless, some terrifying. But one thing is certain: the unknown is always closer than you think. If you enjoyed these stories, you can check out this one too. Stay safe, because you never know who or what is out there.